All right, get this. It's the 9th century. You're a farmer in what's now France, and your crops are getting absolutely pummeled by hail. Now, do you blame it on, I don't know, just the weather? Or option
Interesting.
B,
Okay.
blame it on folks called tempesterias who are, get this, sailing ships in the sky controlling the hailstorms.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you guessed B, congrats, you're officially living in the 9th century. We're diving into the world of medieval weather myths today, and trust me,
Yeah, this is a good one.
you're going to want to hear this.
Buckle up.
So what's so fascinating is how widespread this Tempestaria belief was. This wasn't just some fringe theory. We're talking everyone from peasants to nobles was convinced these, what did they call them?
These weather wizards, they call them weather wizards, that were wreaking havoc.
We're lucky enough to have Agobardus of Lyon's book on hail and thunder to guide us. He was not a fan of these Tempestari.
Big nope.
But before we get into his, bishoply rage, paint me a picture. What did people actually believe was happening up in those stormy skies?
Okay, so picture this. You're caught in a hailstorm, right? The ground's practically white with ice chunks, and suddenly, out of the storm clouds, people swore they saw wooden ships plummeting to Earth.
Oh, no.
Talk about adding insult to injury, right?
I'd be running for cover, that's for sure. But seriously, where did the whole ship thing even come from? Was that like a common metaphor back then, or were they building some seriously impressive kites we don't know about?
Well, it's interesting because you have to remember that Agobardus is writing during the Carolingian Renaissance. So this is a time when logic and reason were supposed to be making a comeback.
Right.
And yet here he is pulling his hair out because people are convinced these skyships are real.
So he sees this as more than just like a bit of harmless superstition, then. This is serious business for him.
Oh, absolutely. Agobardus saw it as a direct challenge to the authority of God, like straight up blasphemy, attributing God's power to some, random weather wizards.
Wow.
And he wasn't afraid to call it out either. Like, he even went as far as to say that those who believed in sorcerers would be lumped in with, and I quote, dogs and the sexually immoral in the afterlife.
Yikes. That's some serious fire and brimstone there. So he's not just a meteorologist in monk's robes. He's on a mission to set the record straight, biblically speaking.
He's going there.
So how does one go about debunking a weather wizard 9th century style? Did Agobardus set up a storm measuring lab, or was this more of a faith-based approach?
Let's just say Agobardus brought out the big guns.
Okay.
Biblically speaking, of course.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the biblical smackdown.
All right, so he starts with the classics, right? He's like, hold on. If these tempesteriae are so powerful, why couldn't Pharaoh's magicians just whip up a hailstorm during the plagues?
Good point.
Like, they were stuck with turning staffs into snakes, folks?
Right.
Not exactly weather-controlling magic.
Yeah, if you're going to believe in magic, at least make it, good magic.
It's impressive.
Impressive magic.
And he keeps going. He brings up Elijah praying for a drought and then praying again for rain, proving it's God, not some, dude in a flying ship who's calling the shots.
Right, right.
And then there's the ultimate power move.
Oh, I know this one.
Oh, yeah.
It's Job. Right.
Job.
That epic speech where God's basically like, where were you when I created the universe? Oh, yeah, that's right. I control the weather, too.
Mic drop.
Case closed. You know it. And it's a pretty airtight argument, you have to admit.
Except for one, tiny detail.
Okay, yeah.
Go on.
Which is that it's kind of ironic because, Agobardus is using the Bible.
Right.
A book chock full of miracles and supernatural events that would make even a tempestarii blush.
Right.
To argue against the supernatural.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, come on. You can't have it both ways.
Let's pick a lane, Agobardus.
Right. So even while he's debunking one myth, he's accidentally propping up another.
Right.
This idea that something out there is controlling the weather, even if it's not these pesky tempestarii.
It's true. And the language he uses sometimes makes it even, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's this one part where he's quoting a passage about God, covering the sky with clouds, preparing rain for the earth, giving snow like wool.
Okay.
It's beautiful, it's poetic,
Yeah.
but it also sounds a tad tempestary-ish, don't you think?
Totally. Maybe Agobardus wasn't entirely immune to a little weather-related awe himself.
Maybe.
A little bit of, ooh, look at that.
Right. And here's the real kicker. He even admits that saints might have some divine power over the elements.
Oh, come on.
Right. So he's basically drawing a line between good weather magic and bad weather magic,
Oh.
which seems a little
arbitrary.
slippery, even for the 9th century.
Yeah. Talk about a mixed message. It seems like even back then, people struggled with that line between the rational and the supernatural, especially when it came to something as, like, powerful and unpredictable as the weather.
Okay, but
Ah,
let's get real for a second. Why were people so convinced these tempesturies were a real thing? Like, was there a medieval Yelp review for, like, best hailstorms or something?
well, put yourself in their shoes for a second. It's the ninth century. You're a farmer, and your livelihood depends on the harvest. A bad hailstorm. That could wipe you out in an afternoon.
Yeah, that's a whole year of work down the drain. I can see how people would get,
Yeah.
like, desperate for someone to blame, or something to control. Exactly, and this is where Agobard he gets really worked up. He talks about these farmers that were so terrified of angering the Tempestari that they wouldn't even plant their crops during a drought.
Oh.
Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's heartbreaking. So not only are they blaming the Temesteri for bad weather, but their fear is actually making things worse.
It gets even crazier
Okay.
because it wasn't just about fear. There was a financial incentive, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People were literally paying a storm protection tax to these supposed Tempestari.
You're kidding. Like a medieval rain insurance scam.
Basically, yeah, the Agobardist called it a canon, and he was furious that people were more willing to fork over their hard-earned cash for this, like, bogus protection racket
Yeah.
than they were to donate to the church or help, those in need.
It's wild how, like, blaming these Temesteris, even paying them off, it must have given people some sense of control, in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable.
And here's the thing, that desire for control, for an explanation, even if it's completely irrational, it hasn't gone anywhere. We
Right.
might laugh at the idea of hail-making wizards today,
Right.
but we still, knock on wood, we avoid walking under ladders, and don't even get me started on Friday the 13th.
It's so true. It's like this deep-seated human need to find patterns and explanations, even if they don't really exist. And when logic fails, sometimes a good myth is just more comforting,
Right.
you know?
Agobardus actually, I think, put it really well. He said this whole belief in Tempestary was, and I quote, a significant part of infidelity, and not just against God, but against, like, reason itself.
Wow.
Yep.
And that makes you wonder, what are we doing today that future generations are going to look back on and think, wow, they really believed that? Like, are we clinging to our own versions of the Tempest story without even realizing it?
It's a question worth pondering. I mean, we might have smartphones and weather apps now, but that urge to find someone or something to blame for the bad stuff, that's timeless.
It's kind of humbling, isn't it? We like to think we're so much more advanced than those ninth century farmers, but deep down, we're still grappling with those same fears, those same uncertainties. But hey, that's why we have deep dives like this one, right? Big thanks to you for walking us through this wild ride through history.
My pleasure. Always happy to geek out about medieval weather magic.
And for our listeners, if you want to see what these Tempestari might have actually looked like, definitely search Tempestari images online. Some of those medieval artists had quite the imagination. Until next time, stay curious and maybe think twice before you blame the next hailstorm on a guy in a flying ship.